This is the final message in a series of messages we have been doing about what it means to be a blessing, what it means to bless. And today we finish with the last S, which is about sharing hope. Hope is a very powerful word. Hope is a man by the name of Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he came up, as a Jewish man, was in a concentration camp in World War II. He learnt that hope is actually more important than food. It's more important than money. It's more important than power. Hope, he said, is everything. And we are at a really interesting point in history. For the first time in living memory, young adults are less hopeful than middle-aged people. For the first time in living memory, young adults are less hopeful than middle-aged people. We're going to talk about hope and where you find your hope. Hope, just from a purely secular point of view, a purely rational point of view, hope is the conviction that the future is good and worth moving towards. Hope is the conviction that the future is good and worth moving towards. The battle of our lives, the battle you are in, is the definition of good. The battle you are in is the definition of good. In Jeremiah quotes God as saying to his people, "My people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own wells," or their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. He's saying, "Oh, my people, you've gone after stuff that can't actually bring you hope. You've gone after stuff that doesn't work, and you've tried to find all kinds of other strategies." I think that one of the challenges we've had in the Christian church is that we have made our whole faith about what happens when you die, and we've simplified the gospel. And we, in doing that, lost sight of the true message of the Bible. You see, the whole Bible is a question about where you put your hope. Starting from the very first chapters. In Genesis, the snake tempts Eve to say, "You don't have to trust God's way of doing things. Trust your way of doing things." That is the story of the whole Bible, is the story of the coming to terms with our tendency to trust our own way of doing things rather than God's way of doing things. And we live in a time where it's more possible than ever to trust your way of doing things. And in fact, our world says that's what you should be doing. It's really weird in our world to not trust your own way of doing things. The world tells you you've got to have hope, but then encourages you to build your own map towards that hope without giving you all the information. It's a bit like, imagine going to Melbourne for the first time and trying to navigate but designing your own map. And as you design the map so it reads how you want it to read, and you have a freeway where you want to have a freeway, and you want a shopping centre where you want to have a shopping centre, and you try and organise your life on the basis of a map you design, you quickly discover the problem isn't the road. It's the map. And one of the real challenges, I believe, for our young adults is they're being told, build your own map, and then being surprised when the map doesn't work. real hope is not something you invent for yourself. The good you pursue is not something you invent for yourself. It comes to you from the outside. I'm fascinated by a man by the name of Václav Havel. Have people heard that name before? Václav Havel? He was in Czechoslovakia. He was born in the 40s, I believe, and he grew up in communist Czechoslovakia. He thought for himself. He was a poet and a playwright, and he fought for human rights. He was not at any point in his life a Christian, but he was motivated and shaped by the echoes of the Christian faith, I believe, so much so that it was hope that drove him. And this is what he says about hope. He says this: hope is not prognostication. That's a big word, isn't it? And this is where we've got to watch. Prognostication means coming up with ideas. Hope isn't that. This is not a Christian speaking. He's saying it's an orientation of the spirit, an orientation of the heart. It transcends the world that is immediately experienced. It's saying if you're going to live from hope, it's not going to be based on the world that you experience. He says it is anchored somewhere beyond the world's horizons. I find this is not a Christian talking. He says, in short, I think that the deepest and most important form of hope, the only one that can keep us above water and urge us to do good works. By the way, he's writing this before the fall of communism, where it's really hard to hang on to hope. And the only true source of the breathtaking dimension of the human spirit and its efforts is something we get, as it were, from elsewhere. I feel that its deepest roots are in the transcendental. That, again, is a big word that means beyond human understanding. Just as the roots of human responsibility are. And watch what he says. He says, though, of course, I can't, unlike Christians, for instance, say anything about the transcendental. It's also this hope, above all, that gives us the strength to live and continually to try new things, even in conditions that seem as hopeless as ours do here and now. He's saying, in the midst of a communist system where he was writing from jail, there is something beyond me that gives me hope, and I don't even have the words for it. The Christians seem to be able to have words for it that I can't use. But there's something beyond me that gives me hope. I think this is where we need to learn to have humility and understand where the real source of hope comes from. One of my favourite verses that I keep coming back to is this picture in Jeremiah, where Jeremiah says, "Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They'll be like a tree planted in the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It doesn't fear when the heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit." What's he saying? Our world says you should try and organise your life in a way that makes you feel good, and your hope should be in your capacity to do that. Your hope should be in your capacity to organise your life, to get the house you want, the relationships you want, the money you want, the education you want, the family you want. That's where your hope should be, in the tangible stuff of life. What Jeremiah acknowledges is something we all know is true. I don't know if you've noticed this, but life is disappointing. Life is painful. Life is full of broken people, broken dreams. And the more you place your hope on things that don't last, the more you will be disappointed. And so what Jeremiah is saying, that somehow if you can put your roots like a tree deep down into the river of who God actually is and what the promise actually is, then somehow it won't matter if you're getting water from the rain. Somehow it won't matter if there's a drought going on. You'll be able to bear fruit no matter what's happening in your life. This is the source of our hope. The source of our hope isn't that everything goes well in your life. God is not your fairy godmother who's coming to wave a wand to make you feel good about everything. I keep coming back to Psalm 23. I learnt this from Pete Clark, where it talks about, even though I walk through the darkest valley. God doesn't promise to save you from the darkest valley. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I love, as we look at the acronym of BLESS, the starting point to make a difference in the world is beginning in prayer. That's where our hope comes from. Our hope comes from the fact that we believe that there is a God who loves us, who sent his Son so that we could ultimately be assured of a future that's incredible, but also so we could live knowing we are loved now. The writer of Hebrews says we have this hope as an anchor for the soul. Have you known that? I guess the question is, what I'm wanting to ask today is, do you have an anchor? Some of the darkest moments of my life, when my dreams have come crumbling down around me, I have discovered the truth of this verse. That in the darkness, as I look to Jesus, I actually have hope that is not about what's happening here. If your hope is all about what's happening here, you are going to be disappointed, because here there's a lot of broken people. Here you are going to age. Here there is corruption. Here there are people who will use you towards their ends. If you don't have an anchor that holds, you are, like Ephesians says, give me like a cork thrown around by the waves of life. As we open ourselves to prayer and listen and learn and eat with people and serve needs, put others' needs in front of us, then what's going to happen is they're going to ask you questions. Why are you so weird? What is it about you that means you are acting differently than everybody else acts? Why do you love me when I hate you? Why do you not react like everybody else reacts? Now, this assumes all those things are true. It assumes that we are beginning in prayer. It assumes that we are listening and learning and realizing we don't see everything as it is. It assumes that we are eating with people, sharing life with people, and it assumes, like we said last week, that we are willing to put others' needs ahead of ourselves. If that is true, then we come to the verse we've been talking about every week and see if we can hear what Peter has to say to us. 1 Peter 3:15-16, in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. He's saying, in your hearts, make sure that Jesus is the center of everything. You are not going to be a hopeful person if your hope is not found in Jesus. Ultimately, you can hold on to hope until you discover the thing that you had hoped in will not provide it. We know this to be true. One of the things, there's a quote from Paul McCartney who said, "I'm so glad we got so rich so young so that we could discover that money really doesn't buy happiness." There are people who spend their whole lives pursuing money. The Bible calls that idolatry. There are people who spend their whole lives pursuing fitness or other people's approval. Whatever it is, whatever you're trying to put your hope in, it won't last unless it's Jesus. And if your hope is in Jesus, you will act differently than everybody else. And Peter says this, you're going to need to be prepared. He says, always be prepared. This is where I actually think we've not done a great job in the church, generally speaking, because we've kind of made the church about answering your questions rather than preparing you to answer other people's questions. And what Peter is assuming here is that you are prepared, you've done the work to be able to answer. When people look at you and say, "Why are you so hopeful?" He's saying, you've done work. That means you know how to answer that question. I've been really inspired. Does anyone know the name Wes Huff? Have you heard that name before? He's a Canadian apologist. And it's interesting, when I first did Bible college and discovered I had to learn apologetics, I thought, do I have to apologise for everything? What is that about? Oh, it actually comes from this verse. Did you know that? Where it says, always be prepared to give an answer. The Greek word there is apologia. And it doesn't mean apologising, although that would be a very Canadian thing to do. It is be prepared to give an answer. Wes Huff, this is probably for many people in this room, the name Joe Rogan will also mean nothing to you. Is that true? You don't know the name Joe Rogan? Joe Rogan is the #1 podcaster in the world. And he had Wes Huff on to explain faith. And it was Wes Huff did an incredible job just sharing his faith. And this last week, Wes Huff was on another #1 podcast, secular podcast of a guy who clearly says he's not a Christian. The podcast is called Diary of a CEO. And Wes Huff came on. And what is fascinating for me in watching how Wes did it is he doesn't... As I hear Wes Huff speak, I was saying to Leanne, there's part of me that is fascinated that I would love to go in with my answers, prepared with the arguments I've got. But Wes wasn't like, he just actually dialogued. It was like he listened to what Stephen was saying, the host of the Diary of a CEO podcast, and answered his questions. He wasn't talking past him. And for 2.5 hours, he explained why Christianity is believable and true and why it matters to him and what happens when you die. And the host said to him, "So am I going to hell?" That's an interesting question. It's normally a question I'd like to dodge. But he looks him in the eye and said, "Yep. Yep, but so is everybody. And so ought I, unless I find my faith in Jesus." And he didn't sugarcoat it, but it was real. What he had done the work to be prepared to have an answer. And that necessitated him. What's really important is sometimes it feels, as we said when we were talking about listening and learning, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said sometimes Christians are talking even when they should be listening. What Wes Huff did is listened and answers the questions he was actually asking rather than gave the answers he wanted him to ask about. Does that make sense? So it's interesting, it says, be prepared to give an answer. The word apologia is actually a legal term. What it assumes is that people are going to look you in the eyes and say, prove that you're not mad. Why do you act like this? And Peter says you need to give a reason for everybody who asks. One of the challenges is sometimes the person who asks will be a 3-year-old. And sometimes it will be a university professor. Sometimes it'll be somebody who is from a different culture or from a different level of education. And you need to be secure enough in who you are to be able to bend down, look in the eyes of a 3-year-old and explain why you are hopeful in a way that makes sense to a 3-year-old, and stand up and look into the eyes of a professor and explain why you have hope in a way that makes sense to a professor. And that assumes you've done some work. And it's interesting, Peter says, for the hope you have. The Greek word for you there is plural. And this is where we tend to over-personalise the faith. And we're talking about, why do I have hope? And sometimes, even as I was preparing this, I was thinking, but sometimes I'm not hopeful, if I'm to be honest. Sometimes I'm having a bad day. Have you ever feel a bit like that? Well, the you there is plural, and it's saying you need to be able to explain to people why the faith we all share is hopeful. Our faith is not actually subjective. It's not based on you. It's based on Jesus. And to the extent your faith is subjective about you, that is actually a problem. Ephesians tells us that there is one body and one spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. And this is where it's just so important. You can't fake this stuff. You can't fake having hope. You do have hope in something because you're still alive. If you lose hope, there's plenty of data to suggest you won't be around. You have faith in something. But faith in Jesus will not let you down. And the faith in Jesus that we profess is what you need to get you through the tough times. I'm grateful that Paul was just honest. He said, because of what Jesus has done, we don't lose heart. Though outwardly we're wasting away, yet inwardly we're being renewed day by day. Do you ever feel like you're wasting away? Do you ever feel like this is just too hard? If you place your hope in the external, it will waste away. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary and what is unseen is eternal. See, our hope isn't about what you can see. It's not. Our world says organise your hope around the stuff that you can see, feel, touch. And you will always be disappointed. Now, I've shared with you before, I know that to be true because I did know that if I got the Grey Nichols cricket bat, I would find my whole life would be okay. There was another time where I thought if I was married, then everything would be simple and my whole life would be okay. Got to say, being married is the best thing that I've done in my life, but it hasn't made life more simple. And my hope is not in Leanne when it is. It's in the wrong place. Paul writes, we live by faith, not by sight. Because there is this incredible future we look forward to. And we also have this hope and understanding that somehow all things work together for good for those who are in Christ Jesus and called according to his plan. There is this incredible future we look forward to, but somehow also there's this life now available because Jesus loves us. Tim Keller says, Christian hope is not optimism. It's a certainty about the future that changes how we live in the present. Christian hope isn't optimism. It's not just pretending everything's going to be okay. It's the knowledge that the future looks incredible. We don't fully get it, but we trust that it's true because of who Jesus is. And as a result of that, we live weird lives where we love our enemies, we love our neighbours, we put other people before ourselves, we live on the basis of love and not of self-interest. Now, I do think this is where we need to come back to the Bible and understand how the early church described Christianity. I think there are 4 things you need to know to give an answer for your hope. The first is to really know what you're looking forward to know that this moment doesn't define you. The amount of money, the relationships, your health, your education, none of that defines you. What defines you is the future you are part of if you've given your life to Jesus. What defines you is you are part of a different kingdom. A kingdom where you are loved and a kingdom that ultimately makes sense of everything else. That's the future you're part of. In addition to that, I think we need to do the work to know the facts of our faith, to know it's not just subjective, to know there's history. We also need to be able to tell how Jesus has impacted our lives and in particular, how Jesus helped you through your darkest moments. Because that's when you look at the New Testament church, they don't talk a lot about how they went when everything was going well. Most of the New Testament is how Jesus helped them through some of the most difficult moments of their lives. So we've talked a bit about the future we look forward to. Do you know, the earliest part, you've heard me say this before, the earliest part of the Bible, of the New Testament rather, is not in the Gospels. It's in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and the first few verses there where it says, where Paul writes, what was passed on to me, I now pass on to you. Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, he was raised on the 3rd day according to the Scriptures, and then he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12, and after that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters. They date this bit of text to within 2 or 3 years of Jesus' death and resurrection, partly because Paul's saying, excuse me, this is what was passed on to me, but partly because he's also saying, there's like hundreds of people that saw him. Go and talk to them. It's clear that this is the gospel that Paul proclaimed, and what this gospel is a bit different to often the gospel we teach and talk about. This gospel is a statement of historical facts. What's really important, if you're going to give a reason for your hope, is to know it's not just about your opinion. It's not just about what makes you feel good or the moments where you've had wonderful times of worship. Your faith is based on historic facts. Did you know that? And there are a bunch of facts that secular historians agree on. People who are not Christians, there are a bunch of facts that they agree on. Do you know that almost all, it's like 98% of all ancient historians who study the first century agree that Jesus existed, that he died by crucifixion, that the disciples had experiences they believed were appearances of the risen Jesus. The disciples' lives were transformed by those beliefs, that the resurrection was preached within months of it happening, that James, the skeptical brother of Jesus, converted. I think that's the greatest miracle, if you see how little brothers relate to their big brothers. And that Paul, the persecutor of Christians, converted. These are not Christian historians saying this. Your faith is based in history. You don't have to just come up with a better opinion. One of the things that Wes Huff has done is done the work to understand the history, but also to understand the different arguments. There's more information if you want to follow through on the notes about that. But Paul also, when he comes to, he knows the history. And he said, and that they call the history, the statements of history, the gospel. But he also, whenever he comes to share his faith, he shares his own personal experience. When people ask you about why you believe in Jesus, it's really important you don't go straight to the textbooks, but you can talk about how Jesus makes a difference for you. And as part of that, I love and hate that the sharpest, clearest moments where I've seen God come through are moments where I most needed him. I hate it because I don't want to have moments like that. I don't like deep pain. I don't like disillusionment. I don't like darkness. But if your hope is going to stand out, it's going to stand out because it's not normal. It's normal to be really hopeful when everything's going your way. It's not normal to be hopeful when things are not. Paul says we've got this treasure in jars of clay, 2 Corinthians 4, to show that this all-surpassing power is from God, not from us. I actually think part of the reason the Christian church has diminished in Tasmania and Australia and the Western world is we've had it too good. We haven't needed to rely on Jesus. Our hope has gently transformed from being in Jesus to being in our families or our education or our money or our houses. But Paul says, we've got this treasure in jars of clay. None of us are going to have enough to be hopeful. Do you relate to this? We're hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. He goes on and says, therefore we don't lose heart. As we said before, outwardly we're wasting away, yet inwardly we're being renewed every day. When he comes to share his journey, he's quick to say, I've had it tough. This is 2 Corinthians 11. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. And he goes, yeah, but despite all that, I had this really amazing encounter with God where I really saw God and it changed my life. And to stop me from becoming full of myself, God gave me a weakness. He gave me what I call a thorn in the flesh. And I said to God, I want you, please, God, take that weakness away. I don't want the weakness. I have not yet met a Christian who doesn't have a weakness. We have different weaknesses, but we all have what Paul calls a thorn in the flesh. And this is where your hope speaks the most loudly. You can spend your life, and people do spend their life pretending they don't have a weakness, pretending that it's all okay. But this is where I think Paul's theology comes together, and he talks about having this treasure in jars of clay. I love and hate the fact that God says his grace is made perfect not in our strength, but in our weakness. I have a question for you. Are you able to be honest about your weakness? Are you able to acknowledge you don't have it all together? Because it's going to be hard to be able to tell people about your hope if you are busy acting like you don't need it. Hope is always clearest when it shines in the darkness. Romans 5 says we boast in one thing, the hope of the glory of God. Not only so, but we glory in our sufferings. And see, I think we made Christianity too easy. We said hanging out with Jesus should make your life easy, not hard. But if your life's easy, then you organize your life around yourself and you are your own God. Paul writes, we rejoice in our sufferings because sufferings produce perseverance, perseverance, character. And character, what does it produce? Hope. We want to be hope people, not religious people. We want to be people who know we are loved and as a result can love others. We want to be people whose lives aren't organised around us but organised around Jesus. And that's where hope comes from. And it's so easy. I don't know if there's been a moment in human history like this where everything about the system we live in is geared to help you focus on yourself, to take your eyes off Jesus and put them on yourself, put them on your family, put them on your bank account, put them on your education, but take them off Jesus. And that's why we need to not avoid meeting together. The writer of Hebrews says, let's hold unswervingly. That brings to mind a picture of, going down the Brooker and sort of in and out of traffic. I'd never do that. But he's saying, no, don't go down the Brooker like that. Keep your eyes on Jesus and go towards him, towards the hope. Hold on to the hope. Don't pretend that the pain isn't real, that the darkness isn't real, that the brokenness isn't real. Don't try and organise yourself so you don't feel any of that stuff. The world will give you plenty of reasons and ways to avoid the pain. But actually step into the pain, face it, holding on to Jesus. And that's what the Christian life looks like. And that's why we need to hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. For he who promised is faithful. And that's why we need to consider, how do we help each other? That is the other heresy in the Christian church, that it's okay not to go to church. It's okay not to have fellowship. And even if you're turning up on a Sunday morning, that it's okay not to have relationship. You won't find that in the Bible. There's no such thing as individualistic Christianity in the Bible. Because you are surrounded by a system, the world, the Bible calls it, that is giving you other messages, that is telling you it's about your pain, your interests, your agenda. And many people are organising themselves so that they can get comfortable enough to go to church, to engage in relationship. No, the church is meant to be a fellowship of people who love Jesus and remind each other that we need him in the face of all the other stuff. Let us consider how we can spur one another on towards love and good stuff, good deeds. Not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. I want to speak specifically to those who are watching online. I'm so grateful for the way we're able to reach out into people's lounge rooms and for people around the world to join us from Nepal and Hobart and even right around the world. But sitting at home in front of the TV is not church. We need to be ready to meet together, to spur one another on. If you are by yourself, getting great input, but by yourself, you are being shaped more by the world than you are by the church and by Jesus. Your hope will end up being in you and your capacity to understand stuff. The church is meant to be a shaping place, a place that reminds you where your hope is actually found. I'm going to invite the band up. We're going to take communion together because that's what we do. You see, this is why we take communion regularly together, because Jesus knew that our hope would quickly become in other things. And again, this is one of those things that Paul received and passed on. He says, I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you. The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he'd given thanks, he broke it and said, this is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. He's coming. There is a different future we can look forward to because of the truth of the cross. And we need to remember our hope isn't in us. It's in Jesus. He knew we would need to remember. And that's why we've got communion. What I'm going to do, we'll sing the first song, the first verse of the song, and while that's happening, we'll come and get the cup and get the crackers and bring them back to your seats. After we've got sung the first verse and chorus, and everybody's back in their seats, we'll take communion together because that's what we do. We hang on to hope together. Come and grab the cup and the cracker. there's real power in this simple meal that reminds us where hope is found, that reminds us why, when we're at our best, we are weird, because we don't operate the way the world operates. We don't organise our lives around our own needs, but we organise our lives in response to Jesus and his love. And as that seeps into our hearts, we become agents of his love in a world that is desperate for hope. Jesus said to us, you're going to need to remember, so get together regularly and take the cracker and eat together knowing this is my body. Let's eat. This little cup, Jesus would have passed round us an earthenware cup, a single cup with wine in it. And he said, this cup is symbolic of my blood. And it's my blood of the new covenant, which means you don't have to organise your own strategies for getting to heaven. You don't need to organise your own religious practices. You just need to come to me. And as Wes Huff said, looked into the eyes of Stephen Bartlett's his name, he said, yep, yeah, you're going to hell. Unless you accept the sacrifice that Jesus made for you. It's life and death. But ultimately it's life. Jesus came so that we might have life and have it to the full. Let's drink together. Thank you, Jesus, that our hope is in you.